Well, welcome out there to my program. Always a pleasure to be here. I have someone who's been on my program a number of times, and every time he comes on, we talk about something interesting. And he brings up most of the topics, actually. I'm just here, and I'm trying to, just help him along, so to speak. He takes over almost, but very good guest, very knowledgeable. So what are we going to talk about? What's going on out there? What's going on in Fall River? What's going on nationally? Well, nationally, by the end of December, I believe, the Congress has to settle the budget problem. And what is the budget problem? Well, as it stands right now, if nothing is done, there's going to be a lot of cuts in government spending, and taxes will rise. What effect will that have on people in Fall River, Massachusetts, and in the nation? Well, apparently a great effect. They're calling it a fiscal cliff. In other words, the closer we get to it, maybe the economy is going to go over it. But probably something will be worked out before that. However, we're going to still have the major problem of a huge deficit, over $16 trillion, and budget deficits each year. So, what's going to happen? And I'm going to talk to my guest, CJ Ferry. Welcome, CJ, once again to the program.
Thank you, Richard. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to bring information to your viewing audience.
Haven't seen you in about 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks now, exactly.
So what goes on in your life in the last 3 weeks?
Always stand on top of something, being a pain in the backside to someone, it seems. But working for the people of Fall River and addressing some of their issues around the city, whether it be accessibility issues, whether it be right now, a big question that I answer for everyone is their Medicare options. We're in an open enrollment period right now, which runs until December 7th, which is right around the corner. And people have to make their decisions on what type of Medicare plan they want. And with this fiscal cliff, we could be looking at some major and drastic changes in Medicare and Social Security over the next couple of weeks.
So what is the, it's a coined phrase, and it basically has to do with the finances of the country, which is somewhat not going well. I mean, huge yearly deficits, budget deficits, reaching at times $1 trillion. National debt, 16 trillion or more. What is the purpose of what they plan to do, and why are they calling it a fiscal cliff?
Well, first off, let's look at where this fiscal cliff came from. This fiscal cliff came from us a year ago. A year ago, Congress did not want to make a decision. They didn't want to do anything. So what they did was they kicked the can down the road. They extended the ability of the government to borrow money, which increased our debt.
They had to raise the debt ceiling.
They raised the debt ceiling. And by raising the debt ceiling, they kept everything else in place, and we'll address it next year.
So raising the debt ceiling has to be done by law.
Has to be done by Congress.
Congress says, well, the debt ceiling we'll say is going to be 16 trillion. And once they reach that, something has to happen.
Correct. And we're about ready to hit that $16 trillion limit. But the funny thing was, a year ago, was that the president wanted legislation passed that authorized the president to act without the Congress approval to raise the debt ceiling anytime he wanted. Well, he didn't get that. But the thing that happened was all the Bush tax cuts, and we hear a lot about that, got moved forward. And what that means is the Bush tax cuts gave the middle-class family extra tax breaks. And those tax breaks resulted in about $30 to $60 more a week in your paycheck. Now, if by December 29th, and that's not too far away, they haven't done something to either extend the Bush tax cut, which, by the way, the Democrats don't want to do.
Now, why don't they want to extend it?
Because by extending those tax cuts, they are also extending the tax breaks given to people raising more than $250,000 a year.
So no compromise. In other words, say, well, the people who are making over $250,000, let's do something to, in other words, rectify that
But that's where the
concern.
Republicans come in. Now the Republicans come in and say, no, but we're not going to raise the taxes on anyone raising more than $250,000. So right there, they've hit their bump. But some announcements that were made this week by both parties was that compromise is possible. The Republicans are willing to allow certain tax concessions to be taken away from people making $250,000 a year.
All right, what is a tax
The loopholes that we're talking about, which
So in
allows
other words,
people-
when they file their tax return, like you and I, they're taking certain deductions.
Correct.
I mean, there are numerous forms. I mean, we have basically ourselves probably fairly simple type returns versus someone who might be in business making $250,000 a year. They might have capital gains. They might have some kind of profit or loss in stock. So,
and they're writing off all of those things.
so
They're
in
writing
other
off
words,
as much as
they
can.
want to cut those back or just plain eliminate them.
Correct. And that way it doesn't affect the middle class, but it also doesn't result in increased tax rates, which are what the Democrats want. The Democrats want to take anyone who's making $250,000 or more, not only take away their loopholes, but raise their tax rates.
All right, so a tax rate might be 35%. They might want to bring it up to 50%.
Right.
So whatever your net income is, if you get taxes on that net income, so to speak, after all those deductions, and then you pay a tax on that amount.
Correct. But on the flip side of the coin, which I have to laugh about because throughout the last election, the Democrats insisted that if the Republicans get their way, they're going to cut Social Security and Medicare. They're going to do it. And every Democrat ran on the platform that I will not allow Social Security or Medicare to be touched. Meanwhile, what was their compromise this week? Well, we'll allow Social Security and Medicare to be changed. So now all of a sudden, entitlements are no longer the taboo item on the Democratic Party. So the people you voted in to protect your Social Security and your Medicare are now saying, well, that's up for bids. That's up for some change. And
Do you think that they fibbed to the public?
I think that right now they're realizing that no matter what they do, they have to do something.
You have to make cuts.
And entitlement programs are the biggest line item in the budget.
Well, that's a misnomer, entitlement, to begin with, isn't it, that word?
It is and it
Who is
isn't.
entitled to what? Well, anything.
It is and it isn't. You know, Social Security was created where people would work, they would pay into a fund, and they would get so much money back. It's been estimated that for you to get as much money back from Social Security as the average American citizen gets from the time they start receiving Social Security benefits to the time they pass away, they would have to pay in $374,000 or more into an annuity to pay them the same amount of money every year for that brief period of time.
And we know that that is not happening.
That's not happening.
So, in other words, to pick up the surplus or the additional amounts, that comes from borrowing.
That
At
comes
this
from
point.
borrowing.
It's
And-
not from revenue. It's not from people paying in, and then others who are on Social Security being able to receive their checks because there are workers paying in.
That's exactly, though, where our Social Security benefits being paid out are coming from.
Borrowing.
The workers borrowing and borrowing against the money that the workers are paying in. So today's worker is paying in to provide the grandma of today a Social Security check and Medicare. And the problem is that this is going to affect us in the medical community. It's going to affect us with our doctors, our lawyers, our hospitals. Everyone's going to be affected by this because this is going to change. Medicare is going to cut the reimbursement that your doctor in the hospital receives. Now, what's to say that your doctor is going to stay receiving Medicare, besides the fact that it's one of the biggest insurance providers in the country?
Well, we know that. Let's face it. A lot of doctors are living off that.
That's
And
right.
they're
That's
making
exactly what they're
big
doing.
money off us, the taxpayers, because they're getting paid by the government. And as far as collection, there usually isn't that much of a problem. Maybe they're not happy always with what they get, but they're getting something versus if they were to charge that patient, in a lot of instances, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of the patient because they're dealing with a
Exactly.
lot of people who...
And this is where the doctors and the hospitals have accepted better to have 72% of something rather than 100% of nothing.
And the
which-
charges today.
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
the Bakers Union should have taken when they were dealing with Hostess, but they didn't. But the thing is that this fiscal cliff is going to affect the cities and towns. It's going to affect the states. And today, on the radio, I heard Mayor Flanagan turn around and say, I can't speculate on what's going to happen if this fiscal cliff takes effect on the 29th. What's going to happen is this. Our budget is based solely on our tax revenues and on grant money.
Fall River doesn't operate on its revenue.
Exactly, it doesn't. It operates on what it can take
From the
and
state.
what I call welfare, which makes us a welfare city, what they can take in the form of government welfare from the government.
So what
to
you're
the
saying
cities.
is if the cuts are made, Fall River will be affected.
It'll be affected seriously. You're looking at safer grant monies that have already been awarded.
That's for 1 year, so that should
That's
be.
for 1 year, so that will pay out this year, but they're basing their budget for the next payout of that, because it's a 2-year grant, the safer grant money. It's for 2 years. So for this year, it's paid, but next year's budget's not paid, because that money's not guaranteed yet. Now, if the budget cuts go into effect and the safer grant gets cut, we're going to lose half our fire department.
All right, what other, how about the school department?
The school department is 90% grant money.
From state,
The city receives 90% of the money received from grants goes to the school department.
state, federal government?
Can you see
Supporting.
the effect that that's going to have on our school department?
What
We're
effect-
already increasing the
What do you think?
school
What do you
day.
think will happen? All right, you say there's going to be an effect. You think people will actually be laid off?
I don't know if people they're going to have to look at cutting where they need to cut. But the problem is this: the school committee, the city council, and the administration have not really put into place a workable plan should this take effect. Again, Fall River is not being proactive; they're being reactive. And to be reactionary in this process, you've only got 30 days. Okay? And everyone's standing around saying, I hope it doesn't happen. I believe the Congress is going to come to a compromise. But I don't think everyone's going to be happy with those compromises.
Well, when you
Because
say compromise, you mean a compromise with some cuts involved.
Exactly.
I mean, the revenue is not coming into the federal government.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. There's no
And
money
that's
coming
why
in
it's
anywhere.
so deeply in debt. So if there's a compromise, it might be you give up some of this and we'll give up some of that. But that amounts to cuts.
Exactly. And what you're looking at, should they not reach any compromise, not only are you looking at entitlements being cut, like Medicare and Social Security, you're looking at welfare, food stamps. But the biggest thing that's going to affect our area is on December 29th, if they have not reached an agreement and have not signed it into law, extended unemployment benefits will end.
Well, suppose they just get together and decide that they're going to raise the debt ceiling.
Well,
So it goes from, I don't know what it is, maybe it's 16 trillion, and they raised it to 17 trillion.
but raising the debt ceiling is not going to address the fact that built into the extension was the fact that by the 29th of December, they have to have a plan to address these tax cuts.
That could be the plan. That could be the plan. Let's just raise the debt ceiling so the government just keeps borrowing money like it has for a number of years.
But do you see how much money we're borrowing a year?
Well, that's the problem. Get into that. That's.
Last year at this time, when the debt ceiling was coming to the top, which was $15
But sometimes
trillion,
they actually take the easy way out.
Right.
Without thinking of the future, because that money has to be paid by somebody.
Right. And the worst part about it is all those bonds, and that's how the federal government borrows money. They issue bonds. And what bonds are notes. It's like your bank note on your house. It's a bond. And I buy it, and it says that the
Have you
federal
been-
government's going to pay me in 30 years
Have
so
you
much money.
been buying any Greek bonds lately?
I haven't bought any Greek bonds at all.
Yeah, that's an analogy in the sense that Greece's its fiscal situation is extremely dire, and if they want to issue bonds, they have to pay high interest rates because no one wants to buy the bonds because the risk is so great.
Exactly.
Can we transfer that example to the United States of America? that
that's-
China and other countries will say,
China owns they hold most of our bonds. That's the worst part about it. And the thing that we've got to understand is, look at what the economists are saying right now. A report just came out of Paris from the Office of Economic Development. And they are saying very clearly that the recession that we've been going through we are not recovering from it as fast as we wanted to. And we won't recover as fast as we want to until issues are addressed here in the United States, especially by the Congress. Now, if you look at the stock market, after the election, the stock market went down. The stock market has been significantly falling ever since. And what's coming out of the CEOs of big corporations across America is, we are not going to hire, we are not going to expand, and we are not going to grow until we know what is happening with the fiscal responsibility of this government. And this government doesn't seem to understand that the more they do nothing, the more it hurts us. If this fiscal cliff occurs on the 29th of December, we will go into, they can call it a recession all they want, but we're going to go into another Great Depression because there's no money anywhere to get anything done.
so what
You're
is
talking extenuating cuts in defense, extenuating cuts in public service, public safety, infrastructure, and more importantly, entitlements. Huge cuts. And on the flip side, you're going to increase your revenue. So you're going to look at tax increases.
Well, do you actually seriously think that that'll happen?
I don't think it will happen. I think
mean,
the compromise will come into play. But I think it's going to be something that both sides aren't
Do you
happy
think
with.
congressmen, after making cuts like that, would want to go home?
No, they're not going to want to.
I understand it's a very serious problem. And they haven't done much about it in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And to allow it just to unravel completely, I doubt if I doubt if that's the scenario. So it seems that, like you mentioned before, there'll be a compromise, but there'll be cuts on
both sides,
given to each party, Republican and Democrat, that control Congress are going to have to say, well, we're going to have to cut here, even though these are our favorite programs, and you, on the other side, are going to have to, the Republicans, consider some rate increases and some deductions that are eliminated.
That's one of the big compromises the Republicans made. Republicans have always taken, since the Reagan eras, a pledge to not add any new taxes and not raise any taxes. And every Republican has signed that pledge, the pledge with America. And for the first time since those pledges were started and since they came out, congressmen who have signed that pledge have said, it's a different time, a different era, and a different financial situation, and it's time that we not look at that anymore. And maybe it's time that we step away with it. And many have said, I will not honor that pledge.
Well, let me ask you this. When taxes are raised, I mean, they have to raise revenue somehow because they have to pay the debt. But as they take money from the economy in the form of taxes, because that's how the government operates. It taxes, it uses the money to operate. And if they do take taxes out of the economy, but the money is not used to build roads and airports and harbors, but it goes into entitlement programs, which are non-productive. You don't make a chair, you don't make a desk. It's just money being recirculated.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with the basis of an economy, which is to keep the infrastructure strong.
That's a communistic economy, to be honest.
Well, is this what they're leaning toward?
It seems to be. It really does. But I think
mean,
what's
roads
very
and bridges you hear about all the time are in grave disrepair.
And what you're bringing that up, I mean, because there's so little money going into, less than 4% of the Department of Transportation's budget goes into roads and bridges. Less than 4% of their budget, their entire budget. Their budget equates to 0.02 something of the national budget. So, I mean, you don't even have a pea under a mattress there. But it's very interesting that the Massachusetts legislature is now taking up the fact that they need to raise taxes, raise gas taxes, and raise registry fees to meet their shortfall for next year.
Well,
And they're basing it on what's happening now.
But getting back to the basic problem, raising this money is one thing. They have the law to do it because, of course, they're the lawmakers and they can raise the taxes. But if the tax money is not put in the proper areas of the economy, are we just rowing a boat toward the reef?
You're rowing a boat that has holes in it, which is the worst part about it.
Because we're not patching the boat.
Exactly. And
There's no one to patch the boat.
And we shouldn't be patching it, okay? We should have repaired it and then moved on. But we don't. We keep kicking that can down the street. And I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, okay? Both parties have been guilty of doing this. But right now we're looking at, in the House, we're looking at Republicans having the control. In the Senate, the Democrats. And because of that, they're fighting with each other. In Massachusetts, we don't have that problem. In Massachusetts, we have a Democratic-controlled House and a Democratic-controlled Senate. And guess what? All they ever do is raise taxes to spend more money. And the spend and tax philosophy has got to stop somewhere. Because you can only tax so much before businesses finally say, it's time for me to leave. And that's what's going to happen. More of our business is going to go overseas.
Another thing, CJ, people talk about very frequently is that it seems government workers are doing very well. They get good salaries. They start off at good salaries, vacations, sick days, a good pension to look forward to if they put the required number of years in. But the worker, he's still trudging along, trying to make a living out of maybe $12, $15, $16 an hour if he's lucky, and not quite making ends meet and looking forward in a lot of instances to almost nothing. You get people in front of Walmart and other places who are saying there is no future working at these establishments because everything is rigged, so to speak, in favor of the stores, Target, Walmart, and that the worker is barely making a decent wage. However, if you take that same worker and almost doing the same, work, and you put him into government, he's looking pretty good.
Right.
What has happened with government and private industry?
See, the biggest problem we have with government workers, and they get very upset when they hear this, because we always hear, the government workers are draining us. The government workers are stealing us their pensions. They get this, they get that, they get the other thing. In Massachusetts, unlike other states, Massachusetts workers, whether they be state, county, or municipal, do not pay into Social Security. They only pay into the state pension plan. So what that makes is Massachusetts, the Social Security Administration, by default. So that's why they're entitled to that, because they're not getting Social Security. And even if they get Social Security, they get what's called an offset. So whatever they're receiving from their pension plan gets deducted from the Social Security check that they might be entitled to, and then whatever's left they can get. And that's usually $100 or less. It barely pays for the Medicare half the time. But what needs to happen, not only in Massachusetts, but across the country, is we need to start shifting from these old-fashioned pension systems, because pension systems only exist right now in the public sector. They no longer exist in the private sector. They've gotten away with them. They've gone to 401ks, 403bs, investment accounts. So we need to, divest ourselves of these pension plans and start having people paying to Social Security and paying to 401ks. Because what's happening
in the public sector.
In the public sector. Because what's happening is that these pensions, and you look at Fall River alone, they're bankrupting us.
Well, unfunded.
Our pension system is not even fully funded.
Yeah, it's unfunded.
It's an unfunded pension system, which means we don't even have the money to pay.
Well, that's isn't that what happened in Central Falls and Rhode Island? The pensions were so great, and the revenue was almost non-existent in a sense, that they couldn't pay the pensions anymore.
Right.
They couldn't pay the expenses of the town, and they had to go into receivership. And the receiver said the only way that Central Falls fiscally could be cured was that pensions had to be cut. Now, isn't that the same thing that's happening in Greece? They're telling the public workers that pensions have to be cut, and they really don't like it. And they say, your wages have to be cut because there is no money. Greece does not bring in the revenue in order to pay for the public workers as far as pensions and even wages. It's gotten so bad over there.
The days of
And they can't borrow money so easily because the other countries in the Eurozone really don't want to pay
That's right.
for Greece's problems.
And the thing
now,
that-
is that something that could happen here?
Yes, it can. And it is happening. We're seeing it. It's happening in Rhode Island. The state treasurer of Rhode Island is doing slashes across the board on pension plans, on contributions, on building up. And we need to start doing that here in Massachusetts and across the country. And the thing is that the days are long gone now when you got a job in the city and you said, oh, good, I don't have to ever worry. I got to do 30 years or 20 years and I can retire with a full pension. And the worst part about it is not that anyone should not receive it, but when you look at who's receiving the highest pensions and for what, you have to wonder. You have politicians in this city which take jobs after they've gone out of office just to bump their pension.
Well, I mean, here's a big controversy. It's been, talked about and reported about, but I guess there was at least four people that were recently hired by the city administration here at, $40,000, $50,000 a year prior to the residency rule becoming effective. But the amazing thing is that all these new people, these people that were hired, were all related to someone already in the administration.
Well, the sixth law has a tendency of just, putting people into jobs that are either related, politicians, or big political contributors. But that's normal for Fall River and the history of Fall River politics.
So we shouldn't worry about that.
It's not that we shouldn't worry about it. It's just something that happens all the time. When Carlton Viveris was in office, Richard over at the Housing Authority used to get everyone.
But isn't this a new era? In other words, people are pretty, interested in what goes on in government, to a point, not everybody. And there's more information available.
Well, with the internet and with, social media, nothing goes unhidden for long. And the problem is
sometimes the report by the newspaper is one thing, but when you read the comment section, you get a lot of additional.
You get a lot more, exactly.
Yeah.
And like I said, with the advent of social media, nothing stays hidden for much longer. To the point that the president signed a bill into law today which protects federal employees for being whistleblowers. So when you look at the fact that even federal employees have to be protected from being whistleblowers for reporting waste.
Well, let me
and
just,
abuses.
We're getting down to the end, and you just reminded me of something. I don't think I have the article, but I want to report this to the veterans out there. There was a case that reached the Supreme Court of the United States, and the case was based on people who display medals, claimed that they had service, we'll say, in Vietnam or Iraq or somewhere else, parade around with this false resume. And we're talking about some people in very high public places, either in office or running for office. And the lawsuit was basically to stop that by anyone who is caught doing that is to be prosecuted. It should be a criminal offense. And I want to let the veterans know it didn't pass. The Supreme Court of the United States voted, I believe, 5-4 against any criminal penalty of someone out there parading around with false medals and a false resume as far as service.
That's absurd.
It is, and I wanted to get, you triggered that in my mind. So, CJ, once again, always a pleasure to see you. And,
Always a pleasure to be here, Richard. It's a great time.
I'm glad you went easy with your comments.
I've mellowed out in my old age.
Thank you out there for watching, and you want to be a guest on a program, let me know. And if you're a veteran, give me a call, contact me, and I'll get you on. And that goes to veterans groups also. So once again, thank you.